story has gone.
Thank you. I was just remembering how different this is. When I first came, I was on the 3 church hop. So I'd go to Christchurch, preach, get driven here, stand up, preach, leave you, and go up to St. Peter's up in the... And it was kind of like a mammoth 3, and I'd forgotten what I said at the previous one, and you didn't really see anybody, and it was just like this massive preaching on a series. So it's great that I've got some time this morning. I could actually talk for 21 years, I think, you know. I remember a few years ago when I was interviewed for a Sam's prayer tape, and... somebody said, oh, here's Pat Blanchard who can talk the hind legs off a llama. And at the end of the prayer tape, after I'd been talking and interviewing, whatever, I think it was about 2003 or something, she said, no, the llama's still standing, she could go on. So just this morning is just a thank you for that accompanying me for many, many years. And it's great to have this contact here with Mary, who I've known for years. We trained together. And yeah, it's like family, isn't it? So again, it's a big thank you. And I just want to show you some slides, some pictures of all the years. And as I've been going through the slides for this, recognizing what God has done, I can't, goodness me, I'd forgotten about that, because you're just in the moment. We've just been through COVID and it was really difficult. And I'm thinking, goodness, I forgot we did that. I forgot this person who, you know, and it's just amazing to look through at faces and look through. And I was just thinking one day, am I going to have time to go through all these photographs, physical and digital, and really put them together in some way that does honour to all that God has done in my life and all those lives that I've touched and been able to minister to in Peru. So we could start the presentation, that'd be good. Yeah, big thank you. Peru's in the south coast, the South America. This is kind of my house, my area where I live, the shanty town. And that's me 22 years ago. Hardly changed at all. My first prayer card sent out when I first left Peru, went for Peru in August 2000. Yeah, I was in my late 30s, and you know, so it's been a long time. And I think really it's amazing, you know, amazing still standing, and amazing that there is so much to thank God for. So next slide, please. So I've been seconded to the Anglican Diocese of Peru, and I've left them in December last year. And just continue to pray for them. I've come back here, they carry on, and we'll see a little bit about the next slide, please. So when I first went out, I think it was Mary's mother, Helen, who gave me a verse. No eye has seen, no ear has heard what God has prepared for those, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love them. And I look at the beginning of my journal, that's probably about, I don't know how many journals back, but I've got it in the front and I write it in the beginning of every one, because I went out with a remit. I knew I was going out for a long time, but when I look back, I think I had no idea what I was going to be doing. I had no idea all the amazing things I would do, the places I would walk, the houses I would enter into, and the people's lives I would share with. And so I just, you know, we don't know what's around the corner, and I just hold on to that, because we don't know what's on God's heart, but we need to keep listening to him so that we can walk in that way. Next verse, please. So this is some of the textiles work. So I did a background in textiles and art. And when I went out to Peru, I started working in this project for the sewing group. There's a couple of examples at the back of the church. If you'd like to look at them, they are for sale. And so I started working in this parish that I later went on to minister in, and I was working with this group with the sewing. And it really is a vibrant colour of textiles, and they stuff bits of lycra with old bits and pieces and make these lovely three-dimensional pictures of life in the countryside. And if you have the next slide, you can see how drastic that is to the kind of grim reality of the unfinished buildings, the slide you saw previously about the shantytown outlook. But these vibrant textiles, it shows that there is hope and there is creativity, and that has been a big thing for me as well. Next slide, please. So the thing you saw just now, there was a little building on the right, which is the blue building of the church. So when I first got to Peru, I had a visit from another church, and they helped us rebuild the church. And we had a 2.5-story building, which was Jesus and Nazareno, where we could expand the children's ministry, the youth ministry. Next slide, please. And really, that was my forte. I was teaching Sunday school. I was, working with the youth. We made a CD. It was all really, full on. Next slide, please. Yeah. I taught English, and one of my pupils, when I started teaching her, she's now an English teacher. And it's just those connections that you forget, that input you have on people's lives. And many of those children that I taught then are all now like 20, and some of them are parents themselves, some of them are still in the church. And that for me is a great ministry to show God's faithfulness in people's lives. Next slide, please. So this is, I was ordained in 2006. Again, being ordained wasn't something that I thought I'd do, especially not in Peru, but that's how God led me. And I think we've got a few of the Kairos team that came out to us in 2007. I don't think you're on there, Katie, but Ellie's there. Is it Gavin? And I don't know who else. Perhaps you were taking the photographs, I don't know. But they came out, and through the years, there's been lots of connections here with St. Matt's. And just amazing to see how God has changed people's lives. Many people that came to us as volunteers, now working full-time in ministry, other people visiting us. It really impacts their life to see other people and how their conditions and they are carrying on with God in their lives. Next slide, please. So at the end of, I think about 2007, when I was being ordained, the ministry in Nazareno was going really well. The disabled ministry was carrying on, and I'll tell you a little bit about in a minute. It just says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to God be the glory, now and in the church. Amen. And I just really think, there was a time when I just think, things were so busy. We had a huge ministry in the youth, a whole load of Sunday school children and loads of other things going, and things were just growing at an incredible pace that I couldn't ever imagine. But it's all to his glory and all to him. If we just turn on the next slide. That's just the end of the verse from Ephesians 3. And the next slide, please. That's me and Sixto. So again, it's about throughout all the generations, and as I said, a lot of these young people here, this is in 2014, I left the ministry in Nazareno. I'd fallen downstairs, broken my feet, and they thought it was better if I didn't have so much work to do, which is probably a good thing, and so I left the congregation there. But that work continues in that place, and I see the generations and people moving on in their faith, young people now they're becoming professionals, going to university, which is an amazing feat. So just praying that those people that were cemented in that children's work and youth work can carry on and really grow to be mature adult Christians working and serving God in that community. Next slide, please. So in all, I was doing this. I was doing volunteer work. We were going out on medical campaigns. People say, what's the weather like in Lima? For half the year, it's like this. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. The fog and the skies are grey. There is no sun. You don't see the sun at all for like about 5 or 6 months. And if you go further up the hills where this medical campaign in 2004 was taking place, you're in the clouds, really. You're going up high. So we did lots of ministry with the medical ministry, and through that, the next slide please, we were starting the work with the disabled. You see at the bottom, finding wheelchairs for people, getting to know mums who had children with disabilities, starting a small therapy centre, having fun. That's Silvana at the top on the gym ball. That's our preschool. And so the work with the disabled kind of emerged. Again, wasn't something that I went to Peru to do. I have no training in disabilities, but it's something that God put on our hearts. Something that God showed that there were people out there who were not included in church, people that were needing support, both spiritually and practically. And I think the whole thing about our diocese is very holistic. It's a very poor diocese, and we work in interventions that will bring not comfort for people for their eternal hope, but day-to-day work, support, family, children, education, and medical work. So I think that, for me, is working in that kind of wholeness was something that I just love to do, and that's what I hope to continue doing when I've now returned. Next slide, please. We also started a church, 2008. Shalom became its own community, a worshipping community, and we had our baptisms, confirmations, and so I was leading 2 churches, running the project, so it's been a busy, full-on 21 years, and but just thankful to God for every person, and it's great to look at them. That little girl at the bottom having a birthday cake is my goddaughter, Jocelyn. She's now 22. And there's us again. And it was the great festive Christmas tableau for the Nativity. We all got dressed up. And there's me, Louisa, and Doris at the bottom as well in one of our services. Next slide, please. So we bought a building, and then we started knocking it down. Mary and Ian and Fiona came to visit in 2010. I couldn't find a photograph of your visit. Sorry, I don't know where they are. But we bought a building. It was 2 stories, but it was really just not really accessible. So we did move into this building, and we used it for about 3 or 4 years. And then next slide, please. the great transformation, the knockdown, the build-up, and the expansion to a 3.5-story building. That's the original building you can see there on the left, and then the big right building. And I just love that picture of all the men putting the cross at the front. I kind of got this idea, and I did some of the design work, and the man at the bottom was welding all this. He said, "This cross looks a bit big." I said, "Oh, no, I think that'll do just fine." And it's just amazing, you know, that presence of God, that beacon of light in that, you know, we had the most amazing building in the whole of the street. You know, it was amazing. And everybody came in because we had nice toilets and we had nice space. So we were kind of like a community hub to people to come and be nice in a nice building. So again, it was nice to share God's blessing with so many people. Next slide, please. And then we turn, that's a big building, 3 stories, and then there's another half a story at the back. The top's now covered because it rains. And so, yeah. And this is our creative dancing. So we have space to dance. So this is in the middle guy is our previous bishop, Bishop William Godfrey, who retired in 2016. And that's our new bishop there on the other side, Bishop Jorge. It's great to have a Peruvian bishop. And that's us at the inauguration of our new building. And next slide, please. And we had a incredible problem with the lift. We paid somebody some money. He ran off with it. And a lot of people, we had to carry people upstairs in their wheelchairs. When I broke my feet, I wasn't able to use the wheelchair the lift. Next slide, please. But we did get the lift in before. So there's me in my wheelchair with my broken feet and identifying with my community. And I since fell over several times as well. So my ankles were a little bit weak. But so there was me. I was bumming up on the stairs to get to my flat upstairs. Because when we built the building, I moved into the shantytown. And although that was quite difficult, living 24/7 over the building, with everybody coming at 8:30 for therapies and leaving at 7, and really a busy community, I felt for the last years of my ministry, it was great to be present with my community, especially when COVID hit. Next slide, please. So we continued with the disabled group. This is a wheels run, race run or something for the community in the local government, trying to get people integrated in society. Next slide, please. With my creativity and everything we can see here. Many, O Lord, my God, are the wonders you've done, the things you planned for us. No one can imagine. If I were to recount, they would be too many to number. Psalm 40, verse 5. We can just see the end of that verse. And again, that verse, really, we used it so much. You know, many are the wonders, many are the things that God has done. And I said, if I stood here and said everything, it probably would take 21 years to say everything that I was thankful to God for in my life, in everybody's lives in Peru. So next slide, just to see the end of that verse, and then on to the next one, please. So I mentioned a bit about COVID. COVID hit Peru really badly. I was due to come back in 2020, but stayed out there to the end of the year. It was a very difficult time. We have an amazingly fragile health system day to day in a normal time, but with COVID it was really difficult. And most people with COVID trying to get their hands on these bottles of oxygen, which were like gold dust, and keep their loved ones alive the best they could in their homes, because the hospitals, the system had collapsed. And so it was really difficult. Next slide, please. So very grateful to those donations that came through link churches like yourself to take us food parcels, buy medicine. This is Felicita, one of our great faithful people, receiving a bag of food. This is Ricardo, one of our young people with disabilities, carrying the food bags around to people. He was like my gopher, and we'd carry the bags around. The bags were like 2 kilos of rice, 3 kilos of this, so he probably weighs about 12 kilos, that bag, you know, but he was determined to do his bit to help out. Next slide, please. We took food right up into the shanty towns at the top of the hills, and this is Miguel Anker, one of our lovely dear guys with Down syndrome. And so, sadly, his mother in the Green Mast died during COVID last year, but he's got some good sisters around him and still connected to the Shalom network so that he can get the support. But that was a very sad loss for us, and we have lost several of our church members as well, not just through COVID, but because they weren't able to go to hospital for other things and they just died at home. So again, it was a very difficult time. And that for me was a difficult time because I'd already decided to leave. And so again, but I was grateful to be able to support them through that last wave. And they've been incredible in connecting and staying connected to each other and to God. Next slide, please. With our creativity, rather than the children making things in Sunday school, me and my colleague made things. So we hung them on the wall outside. That's a Pentecost. and then the story of the 10 virgins, and ones with very happy ones with the oil and the sad ones at the bottom. So every week we'd make them in the afternoons while the project was closed, and we'd hang them on the railings, and people could take them, and the children came by. So we felt that we were able to still feed people with God's word during that time. Next slide. This is my last service in Shalom in the end of November last year. I said goodbye. A few of us gathered. There was a few more there as well. And I leave in charge the guy behind me, the one with the diagonal stole, Raul. Next slide, please. This is Raul. I've known him since I went to Peru. I remember counselling and working with him as a young child when he was 14. He's now 34. And I was so pleased that when I was back in the UK for a short while last year, the bishop decided to send him, and I just felt that was so much God's provision to hand over to Peruvian leadership. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting, not the kind of leaving that I'd expected, but God has provided a solid disciple of God, a solid young man who has a great servant heart. And yeah, it was incredible to go back for 4 months last year and to be able to hand over. Although it was very difficult, he'd known me for a long time, and I said, look, this is, go with whatever you need to do. And so it's in his very capable hands. And God still carries on. God is the same there, here, and everywhere. Next slide, please. And this is a service from 3 weeks ago, 3rd of April. And there's Enna and Lucy giving out communion, and there's Felicita and Luis in his chair. So I don't really keep much in contact with Peru, but it fills me with joy that they send me these pictures, and I know that the church continue to faithfully worship there. He also sends me news that he's found $70 and 70 euros in a bag that I left, which is very good that he found it before he gave it to somebody else, and also that other members of our community have passed on since I left. Because of COVID and health complications. So the situation in Peru does carry on very precariously. Children are only now going back to school after 2 years of having nothing, no schooling at all. And certainly our community, there was no techie stuff as well. Next slide. I've returned to Bournemouth, so I've changed one lot of sand for another lot of sand. And next slide, please. That's me in the New Forest, enjoying my new life back in the UK. And next slide, please. That's me at a sewing group. So I was thinking I might come along on Monday evening for chatting and knitting. I love knitting and sewing and crafting, so you might see me there tomorrow joining things. So that's just what I just want to share. That is what I cling to. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. For he who promised is faithful. And I can stand here today, after 21 years of some difficult times, some joyous times, and even at the moment, I'm going through some difficult times, and the transition's not always easy, but I can say that God is faithful, and he who has been with me and us these last years, however long you've known him, or whether you're just getting to know him, he is faithful. So I'm going to look forward to showing you a bit more later on. I probably won't talk for so long. Next slide, please. I think that's... And I've painted these pictures. They are originals. And so at the end, if you'd like to collect one from my table, they are a free gift from me, as I, in my creativity, am still and know that God is with me in all the circumstances of change and different direction. And I am rejoicing the Lord always in the good situations, in the bad situations, because he is faithful. So do come and take a painting, frame it, put it somewhere you never find it again, or just look at it and remind yourself that he is faithful in whatever situation we face. And I come back today, as a Christian who still continues to serve God. And I pray wherever we are, we continue to serve God. And I think that might be the last slide, apart from saying thank you. Muchas gracias por su apoyo. Bendiciones. Thank you.
Stay there, stay.